I have seen a lot of ugly fights in my life, okay? I have seen fights in barns. I have seen, I've seen a lot of stuff. But this is the ugliest fight I've ever seen in my life. And you'll see why. Here we go. So this is from the World Combat Championships that happened years ago. Somewhere in the early 90s maybe. They were trying to compete with the UFC. And they had two divisions. They had a striking division and a grappling division. And the winner of the striking division, in the end, was supposed to fight the winner of the grappling division, right? But they had super weird rules. And the only difference was that people in the striking division, they could grapple, they just couldn't do submission holds, right? Oh, God. And so somehow, Erik Paulson, who was really more of a grappler, found his way into the striking division. And he'd won an earlier match. I forget what it was. And he was fighting this other guy, James Waring, who they label him here as a boxer, but he's more of a kickboxer. And you'll notice how much tape is James Waring wearing on his hands. Let's see if he raises his hands here. See, they had two really weird things going on here. Well, one, there was no rule about how much tape you were or weren't allowed to put on your hands. See? You hear Cecil Peoples telling them there's no choking, no submissions. So James Waring, on his hands and on his feet, he's got so much tape, it's like they're like concrete. More importantly, or maybe equally importantly, what I want to point out here is that Erik Paulson has not cut his hair. So, and there's no rule here saying you can't grab the fence or you can't grab the hair. So, watch what happens. You can already see the guy with the 7 pounds of tape on his hands and feet is trying to grab the hair of the guy with the long hair. And Erik Paulson, he'd done kung fu, but he'd also trained with a variety of guys. I'm pretty sure he'd been training with Rickson Gracie and a few other people, And I don't know much about James Waring other than the fact the guy's wearing an absolute ton of tape on his hands and feet, which is of huge significance because if your hands are basically baseball bats. I mean, James Waring, this is along in the evening there, and James Waring had won his earlier fight by clubbing his opponent on the head, and the guy just dropped like he'd been shot. You know what I mean? And Paulson, the fight he had before this, I think it was against Sean McCulley, and it was more of a ground and pound, slippery, nasty, back and forth sort of thing. So, And also, Paulson is quite a bit smaller than James Waring, but he's holding the fence here, Anyway, yeah, the fights I'm uploading, I want each of them to have sort of a lesson we can all learn. And the lesson for this story is you should not go into a mixed martial arts fight where hair grabbing is allowed with long hair. And you will see why in a moment. And like I said, this gets very, very, very ugly. And this is no criticism. This is no criticism of anybody, right? Erik Paulson has contributed a lot to martial arts, and he's been in lots of tough fights. And I actually met him years ago in Las Vegas at a fight where Caitlin Young was fighting Sarah Schneider, and he was. I don't know why he was there, but he was there cornering somebody. Anyway, nice guy. Chatted with me, and he probably learned the same lesson that we're about to learn in this fight, is that when hair grabbing is allowed, get a haircut, I mean, it reminds me of the early UFCs. I'm tempted to say UFC 4. There was a fight between two guys Guy Metzger and Jason Fairn, who both had long hair. And they had an agreement, no hair grabbing, right? Which one of the play-by-play guys kind of made fun of. But had they not had that agreement, perhaps that fight would have been as ugly as this fight is about to become. And it gets real ugly. For, spoiler alert, it gets real ugly. And you can see, Erik Paulson's trying to take this guy to the ground, but, I think for this fight, I didn't see what the weigh-ins are, but James Waring has 30, 40 pounds on the guy. And also, as you can see, he's holding the fence. And when you're allowed to hold the fence, man, there are certain fights in mixed martial arts history where people prove it's really hard to take somebody down when there's a fence for them to hold. You know what I mean? And now he's holding his shorts and see, this was from years ago before there was any standardized rules about mixed martial arts. So people are grabbing the hair, they're holding shorts, they're grabbing the cage. People are wearing enough tape in their hands they can beat a frickin', a seal to death or whatever. Not that you'd want to beat a seal to death, but if you wanted to, you would, with your hands, you'd tape it up, you know what I mean? And look, see, James Waring now has a hold of Erik Paulson's hair. Watch this. See? This is where it starts to get real nasty. And Paulson too, he's got tape on his hands and feet, but he doesn't have nearly as... Look how much tape James Waring has in his hands. That is crazy, And like I said, they said that James Waring is a boxer. He's really more of a kickboxer, And I'm sure going into this, he'd taken a little bit of grappling. Maybe he'd, done some jiu-jitsu with somebody, This is another fight that, going into it, maybe they didn't know what to expect because it was so early in the history of mixed martial arts. But then after this, everyone learned something. You know what I mean? It's like lawyers citing case law. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if people still do it, but I used to do it all the time. You would quote certain fights and what you learned from that fight. You know what I mean? And the lesson we learned from this fight is that, one, you should get a haircut if hair grabbing is allowed. And two, if you're a promoter putting on a mixed martial arts event, you should have a rule about how much tape a person is or, isn't allowed to put on their hands and feet, Because otherwise the guy's just turning his hands into concrete, Anyway, you'll see what happens in a second, or maybe a minute or two. It gets, holy Lord, it gets ugly. And ironically, you'll see the guy up there leaning over the side. He also has a ponytail. I myself, years ago, I had a ponytail back in university and stuff. I have some stories about that, I'll tell you. And then one day I started doing jiu-jitsu, and then I just cut it all off and had hair kind of like this. Maybe a little bit more. I'm doing okay. But anyway, yeah, I had a ponytail when I was doing Taekwondo, and then I switched from Taekwondo to Hapkido because there was no jiu-jitsu in town at the time. And the Hapkido guys, one of them had gone down to train with the Gracies, and he came back with showing us triangle choke and arm bar and scissor sweep and stuff. And we were grappling a little bit, and nobody had really even grabbed my hair, but it was kind of inconvenient. So I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna do a grappling sport, grappling art, or whatever, I should get a haircut. Which is a conclusion that Erik Paulson didn't arrive at until I was gonna say after this fight, but he probably arrives at that conclusion during this fight. But by then, he can't just say to his corner, hey, throw some scissors in here. I've made a terrible error strategically. You know what I mean? He probably thought having his hair just in a ponytail or whatever would be good enough. And as you'll see in this fight, that is not nearly good enough. That was a mistake, And again, I'm not criticizing anybody. You know what I mean? And I had I have the power of, everyone, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. You know what I mean? So I'm sure Erik Paulson would be saying the same thing, along with some other stuff if here watching this fight, but watch this. It's a pretty nasty fight. Like I said, the World Combat Championship, they didn't have a lot of rules, you know? And the referee there is Cecil Peoples, so, you know, whatever rules they did have, he probably didn't know them. I remember I was at a mixed martial arts event once in San Jose. I was at a Strikeforce event, and I was a journalist sitting ringside, cage side, what have you, and Cecil Peoples was one of the refs. And between rounds, he like leaned up over the side of the cage thing and asked somebody if like stomping was allowed. And he'd been refereeing for like already half the evening. And then he leaned up over the fence and asked one of the judges, "Is stomping allowed?" And I remember I was like in the journalist pit or whatever, and I was like, oh my God, the referee doesn't know the rules. Anyway, whatever. I haven't had a mixed martial arts fight. I haven't reffed a mixed martial arts fight. I'm just a jiu-jitsu nerd, and I've had a whole bunch of jiu-jitsu fights, and I've refereed a bunch of jiu-jitsu. And as you can, whatever. Back to the fight. James Waring now has a handful of Erik Paulson's hair. Like a real handful of it. You know? And now he just starts unloading on him, and it just gets... It gets real ugly, you know? And I want to say it's the ugliest fight I've ever seen. You know? And I have seen some ugly fights. I have seen, I don't want to say hobos, but I have seen people fight in a barn who are right off the street. People fighting wearing jeans. You know? Craziness. But look at this. I think when I say ugly, I mean it's like... It is not representative of martial arts. It just looks like, you know, I don't even know what. It's just ugly. It just gives you I don't want to say the willies, but it just kind of is like, oh Lord, you're kind of a little bit embarrassed to even be watching it. You know what I mean? And that's what we're doing. We're watching a dude with like 2 rolls of hockey tape or God knows what kind of tape on either hand, hold on to another guy's hair and beat and pound him on the face with his other hand. You know what I mean? And this is entertainment, you know? Look at that. Like, look at that. Look how much tape he's got in his hands. Like, that is crazy, you know? See? Like the fellow's saying there, he's got a death grip on his hair. Like, man. And as you can see, he's kneeing him, you know? Look at that. Now I think he tries to stomp on him here while holding on to his hair. Or maybe I'm thinking of an early UFC, I don't know. He's elbowing him and stuff. You know? And there's like, in martial arts, there's all kinds of techniques to deal with someone holding onto your hair. Wrist locks and arm locks and stuff. But they don't actually work. You know? When a guy's got this much tape in his hands, you can't apply like a clever wrist lock. And when a guy's heavier than you and all slippery and probably has Vaseline on him and stuff, you can't arm lock him. They're in a tournament or whatever, they're in the striking division, so Erik Paulson can't sit and try an arm lock or a triangle choke or something, which, you know, and even if he did, that probably wouldn't work because it's all messed up, you know what I mean? But like, you know, this is clearly a question for which, at the time, Erik Paulson had no answer. What do you do when someone has taped their hand to the point of them being basically casts, you know, and they've got a hold of your golden locks and they're pounding on you, you know, and you're not allowed to do any submissions? What do you do in that situation, you know? Like, all martial arts are answers to questions. They are strategic ways to achieve success in a certain situation. You know what I mean? And, you know, this was a situation that nobody predicted. Nobody. And there was no martial art, there still is no martial art designed to address this situation. You know what I mean? Like, remember years ago when, like, Hoist Gracie fought Chemo and Chemo had the long hair? What would have happened had it been reversed? What would have happened if it had been Hoist Gracie with the ponytail and Chemo was, you know, 260 pounds and had a shaved head? What would have happened? Maybe this, you know? I remember in that fight, Hoist versus Chemo, I believe Hickson Gracie was in Hoist's corner, and Hickson had like a long ponytail. I wonder if Hickson had any fights where hair grabbing was allowed while he had a ponytail. You know what I mean? I don't know. But I'll tell you this. having long hair is not a good idea in a real fight. People will grab it, and then you are in a lot of trouble. You know what I mean? I suppose the same thing is true of having a long beard, you know, or having excessive armpit hair or pubic hair or something. If someone gets a hold of that. Actually, I had a jiu-jitsu match years ago where a guy was grabbing my pants, but actually had 2 handfuls of pubic hair, you know, through the pants or whatever. Really messed up my guard. You know what I mean? And afterwards, when I was getting changed and showering and stuff, it looked like someone's toupee had fallen off, you know what I mean? Because all my pubic hair had gotten torn out. But enough about me getting my pubic hair torn out. Let's talk about Erik Paulson getting his hair pulled out. Having long hair is a strategic disadvantage. See? There, that's what we're learning right now. Or that's what they learned, you know, 30 years ago. This was about 30 years ago, because it was just after. I think it was, I'm not going to say. I'll put the date, when I post it online, I'll put the date in there. But this was, they wanted this to be competition for the first UFC. You know what I mean? There was a few of them. There was this one, there was Extreme Fighting, there was another one called Mars, Martial Arts Reality Super Fighting. They all wanted to be, you know, they saw what the UFC was doing and they thought that's a good idea. But none of them lasted, you know? But I'll tell you, we all learned something. We all learned something. Look at this. You know, I'll repeat myself. Because of fights like this, they made rules involving no hair grabbing, no fence grabbing, how much tape you're allowed to put on your hands and feet, you know? Nasty. But the thing is, fights like this, before rules were invented, this is the kind of fight where you can see what can happen in a real fight with very few rules. You know what I mean? Not that you and I are going to find ourselves in a fight in a frickin' caged, you know, whatever they want to call this, the Circle of Doom or whatever. You know what I mean? And I've already, you know, I cut my hair, you know, in 94, you know, when I started doing grappling right after the first UFC. I mean, I had a ponytail from about, I don't know. I grew it in like 1990. Not that you have a hair journal, but, you know, I had a ponytail in like 91, 92, 93, and then I cut it in 94, I think. You know, because I had started grappling and decided it was a bad idea. But, and look, you know, back to the fight. Waring is holding his shorts, he's kneeing him. Like, it's just nasty. Every now and then you see a fight where you're just like, my God, this is unpleasant to see. You know what I mean? And look at this, watch this. Erik Paulson's down, there he is. He's holding his hair and stomping on him. Like, what in the hell are we looking at? He's clubbing him, he's like, you know what I mean? Imagine, yeah, see, look, and then, you know, the referee stops the fight. Like, just, I don't know if Erik Paulson tapped or if the referee had just seen enough or whatever, but like, and now they're like hugging each other. It's so weird. Like seconds ago, that guy was holding Erik Paulson's hair and stepping on his face. And then they're like hugging. Like and saying, okay, thanks for the fight. Like, what the hell what is going on? You know, it just seems like a weird jump to make, you know? To go from a guy, seconds ago he's stomping you on your face while holding your hair, and then you're hugging him and thanking him for the fight. Like, what? You're thanking him for holding your hair and stepping on your face? I don't know. I mean, don't be rude to the guy, but Jesus, maybe that's not a situation that should end in a hug. You know, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. And they're high-fiving. Why the hell are you high-fiving? You know? Like, what are you high-fiving? What is the joint celebration of your high-five? That you weren't killed? I don't know. And again, I'm not criticizing anybody, but my God, what a, you know? And then look at this. Here's another guy with a big, long, who's this guy? His hair is even longer. Perhaps he's learned something from this fight. You know, the guy with the camouflage pants and the tank top. You know? Who's this? I don't know. Lunacy. There was a lot that was super weird about this event. And now, he's going on to the finals where I think he fights Renzo Gracie. I think. It's also funny that at the start, Cecil, people said no submissions, and in the end, the announcer says winner by submission. I just find that kind of amusing. I don't know. Anyway, there's that. And I have a few other fights from this particular event that we learned something from. I'll upload those too. If you have comments or whatever, you can post them below. Anyway, see you next time.